Good morning from California. Good afternoon for you guys down in Europe. It's great to be in this event again, and I look forward all the time for this event. And thank you for having me here. I've been connected since 2 in the morning here, my time, and I've been following the sessions here. Jumping from session to session. You guys have great content, so it's an honor to be here with you. For those who are connecting there, my name is Opa. The OBS cuts my head off, so let me use this. My name is Armando Lacerda, and I am an independent consultant. I work with multiple companies here in the US and some down in Brazil. I'm originally from Brazil. And currently, my job role, the hat I'm wearing is the data architect and data engineering for cloud solutions, for cloud data platform. I'm originally a developer. I started as a developer a long time ago, like 3 lifetimes ago, and became a DBA back in Oracle 7. Actually did something on mainframe too. And when SQL Server 7.0 came along, Microsoft down there in Brazil started looking around people to learn like we're doing here now. And I got seduced by the dark side of the force, moved into SQL, never looked back into any other platform for solution implementation. Of course, we deal with other platforms all the time to collect data or write there. I'm also a Microsoft MVP and also a Microsoft MCT. MCT means a Microsoft Certified Trainer. I love delivering classes. I love to be in the classroom environment. I learned so much when I start exposing Microsoft technologies and what they can do, and people bring up their particular use cases that they are involved. I'm not, so I learned from them how to apply these things. I love the classroom environment. Every time I have a chance, I'm there. And I do hold a few Microsoft certifications. Like I said, being a certified trainer for over 26 years, so I have a bunch of certifications in my transcript. Today, we will be talking about Synapse pipelines. And there have already been a bunch of Synapse pipelines talks in this event, and I followed them. Ginger's one was great, her approach to notebooks and all of that. This particular one here is a more introduction level, and try to lend a hand to the DBA that's working on SQL servers, working with SSIS, SS Integration Service, and try to get the bridge from that environment into what happens in the cloud, which is not SSIS. Even though we can run SSIS in the cloud, there are other options. Like I said, the Synapse pipelines is one of them. So if my clicker works, let's get mouse over here. There we go. If my clicker works, and does, our agenda will be just 4 topics here, just quick, scalability. We're gonna go through some scalability points and a quick review on the SSIS skeleton. And I got to be honest with you. I put in this environment. This is the first time delivering this particular session. So you guys are my guinea pigs. It's the first time I run this question. And let me go back a couple of slides in here. If you'd like to connect with me on LinkedIn, I do. My Twitter handle, it's pretty much an echo of what happens on LinkedIn. So if you'd like to connect me with LinkedIn and send me a message about what you would like to see in this session after we finished and give me some kind of feedback, I would really appreciate it, because I want to get this one better, this particular content better. In any case, so scalability points, like I mentioned, and like I was being honest, I installed SQL, Visual Studio and data tools in Visual Studio for this session here, and I had a hard time to get that thing going because it's been so long since last time I did some thinking there for production. Actually, it's been like 5 years already since the last time I delivered something for production in integration service. So it was fun. It was fun to get this thing going. And then we got to go into the bridges, and when I got start, I will start going through. I will start going through some examples and some hands-on, some demos there on the live environment, and of course the workshop there. All right, so pretty much these 3 topics in there. Now, my personal struggle when I start moving, finding my way to the cloud. And, I just mentioned, I started with SQL Server back in SQL Server 6.5. I was SQL Server 6.5, as some of you may remember, it was not a very scalable database back then. So I always been working with data warehouse solutions. So Oracle 7 was the best we had back in the time, late 90s, early mid 90s. And then SQL Server 7.0 came along with a lot of tools. One of the tools was called DTS, Data Transformation Service. And that tool, captured my heart. I was so in love with that thing. When the first pass happened back in 1999, I think, in Chicago, I was there in Chicago because of the whole collection of tools around the database. So I started making a lot of money doing DTS packages still down there in Brazil. When I moved here to US, I started working with integration service when they released it, I think in 2005. And then it was paradise. As a data guy, back then we were just DBAs. Data engineer was not a word back then. As a data platform guy, as a DBA guy, integration service was my thing. Was one of the biggest. I was in love with the thing. I used the technology for everything. And then came the cloud, right? Back in 2010, 2009, 2010, when the cloud started becoming more visible and more accessible, SQL Server came along, and SSIS was not there in the platform as a service. And why not? That one started hitting me really hard back in 2013, 2014. I was like, this is my bread and butter. Why are you taking this from me? I want to keep this thing. Why it's not there? And making a long story short, a couple slides here just to to share with you what I've learned is this. Integration service is a service that is really coupled with SQL Server. It's licensed with SQL Server, so we cannot have integration service without have SQL Server. Integration service can run without SQL Server, right? You can have it on a standalone machine. SQL Server can be on another machine, and it can run the packages on its own machine. So it can kind of run without SQL Server, but it runs better when it's connected with SQL Server. And to one SQL Server, right? It grows over multiple SQL Server instances. So this is one of the most common deployments you see out there. Another very common deployment is to have that integration service that's connected to its management SQL server, right, to a particular database in there, the SSIS DBA database in there. You see it's reading from multiple sources. For simplicity, I just put SQL in here, but whatever source it is, to whatever destination it is, it connects to multiple sources, to multiple destinations, and we can do all the transformations we have, but still, and here's the point, it's one compute element doing all the data transformations. And that compute element connected to one SQL instance, if you want to have the full feature of the thing, right? To one SQL instance to do that one. And when you do transformation like this, is not the fastest possible way. If you're doing straight SQL to SQL in the same service, when you get the real fastest performance. But again, it constricts to one server, to one box if you go that route. And this is the problem. That's why SSIS could not make its way to the cloud. It was not designed for scalability. It was just not designed for scalability. And what does it mean? It was not designed, sorry, it was not designed for scalability. It means this. It's been over 20 years that compute clusters have been under development. I have read about many projects in the early 2000s from IBM, from other computer researcher companies, where they have this idea of having multiple, here's the point, multiple compute nodes in, being spinned up to process data, and all these compute nodes sharing the same storage place where they grab the portion, the slice of the data, do the computation, and spills out the result probably in the same file system, but could be some other places. So SSIS cannot do this. That's the big problem with SSIS. It cannot do this. It cannot have multiple instances of SSIS splitting up package execution. Now, there is a feature that throughout 20 years plus working with SQL Server, I have never had the chance to see it in production, called the scale out, SSIS scale out, where you can have a management node and a worker node. And if you go that route, it feels like you could do something like this, but actually you can't, because what it does, it spins up packages in multiple servers. It's like having SSIS in multiple places, but the actual package is processed by that particular server. It can run in parallel in multiple services, connecting to multiple different sources, distinct sources to probably distinct destinations, could be the same. But the bottom line is the package itself, it's running on a particular compute node. Could have multiple cores in there, can be a very beefed server, but still one server. This particular one here, having multiple servers working a node, splitting the job, SSIS was never designed for that. You know what's funny? I found it funny, because SSIS as an ETL tool, it was not designed for this, but the SQL Server, the database that it comes to, the tool is a tool for, does support that. Actually, if you go back and look into SQL Server for on-premise deployments, and you look for parallel data warehousing, you see exactly that. Let me get my magnifier here just quick. You see exactly that, right? You see that design in here, and this is, SQL Server forever almost. You have the control nodes in here, and these control nodes, they get queries from the clients, and which ETL is one of them. So SSIS is in here, and it gets those queries, and it spreads out through multiple database nodes, multiple cluster nodes. So SQL DW, SQL Parallel Data Warehouse, it was already designed for that. SQL can do this, but SSIS can't. That's why in Synapse, we have the dedicated SQL pool that has designed pretty close to this one here. And we have the serverless SQL pool. That's pretty much the same design of this one here. When on the serverless SQL pool, these nodes here, they respond on demand according to the statistics on the data files they're going to touch. And the storages are not really connected to the servers, right? They're the data lake. The storage is the data lake. So SQL Server can do this. That's why SQL Server is in the cloud. They don't have Synapse today, but SSIS cannot. So that's why I had to kiss goodbye to SSIS a few years ago, and it broke my heart, but there we go. I want you to get where I am now. So just to be on the same page, I want to make sure we are looking at things in the same perspective. We're using the same names, because like I said, I was not using SSIS for a very long time, and preparing for this session here was kind of fun to do those kind of reviews. So what do we have in here? This is a typical structure of an SSIS package, where you have the control flow and the data flow engine. So again, this is just a review, not really learning anything new in here. In the control flow, as the name implies, we have the flow. We define what's done and what's done next, and what should be done in the case of a failure or success and things like that. So no real data transformation going on over here. And the data flow engine, where data transformation can happen, right? And this is from Microsoft back in SQL Server 2014, I think. And they're already using the name pipeline and data flow. And I found it so funny when I went back like almost 10 years ago to collect this designs in here from Microsoft curriculum and see, look, they didn't change the names. They're trying to make it easy for people to transition. Yeah, kind of messed up the whole thing, but that's fine. Yeah, so this is where the data changes, where we have data transformation. This is we control the sequence of data transformations, and we can apply conditions to what comes next, right? And the whole thing is my package. We will have a very similar design to this one here when you go to pipelines, and we are about to get in there. Let's just finish this review. Another thing we have with the data flows, and this seems to be a little small. Let me see if I can, whoops. Let me see if I can grab this one here a little bigger. When I was doing this, it felt to me it was in the right size. Yeah, or, oh, there it is. It disappeared. Now it's right here. So let me grab this guy here and make it a little bigger. There we go, better. All right, so when we are creating our packages, and here we go, this is the blue here is one of the packages, right? When we are creating our packages in here, we have two deployment methods in SSIS. We can do into the SSIS catalog and go into SQL Server, or deploy them to a folder right on the server and have SSIS collecting the package from the folder and run it from there. Either way, there will be pretty much the same behavior, right? And for the packages, just where the configurations are and things like that. So this is where the package is stored, either within SQL or on an external folder. When we go into Synapse Pipelines, we will have exactly the same. It's funny how they really follow the same design. We're going to have the exactly same design, right? We can have our artifacts in Synapse Pipelines into Synapse itself, or into a repository where we can have version control and things like that to the artifacts we come to create. So as you can see, the bridge is not that far, right? It's pretty close. The concepts are pretty much the same, but there are some expansions to this specifically because of the characteristics of the cluster processing, as well as the fact that this thing, the Synapse, this thing here we have on a slide deck is on-premise, and Synapse happens in the cloud. And this is a very important thing to keep in mind. It will make the difference, make things easier when you start thinking about some of the jumps and hoops you have to go through when you go to the pipelines. This was designed for a time and age when computing was in your data center. And when you're talking about getting data from external sources, from partners, you usually do a VPN or you transfer files over and the files are in your data center. So connectivity in between data centers were not a thing. And in Synapse, that runs in the cloud in another data center, connectivity to external data centers, your own on-premise data center is a thing. So there are a little bit more elements involved into this one here when it gets to deploy the packages and run the packages. So with that, I think we are ready to start seeing how things translate to Synapse pipelines. So let's take a look. The first thing, like we said, is the control flow. So in the control flow, what we see in there, and I apologize here, I just noticed that the lining here instead of blue came white when I copy and paste from Microsoft content. And you know it's blue, right? Completion here is blue. Successful condition is green and failure is red. Okay, we know that. So the first thing we see there is the package and the flow in the package. So when you go to Synapse, and let me switch here to Synapse for that. Let's see, where is my, I think it's this one. Yes. So let me get this guy here bigger. Let's make Armando smaller and the thing there bigger. Let me know if this is big enough. Let me see. All right. So just as a brief overview here, what am I running? So I created a resource group in Azure just for this session in here. And in this resource group, I have a virtual machine running SQL Server 2012 and all the artifacts in there, just to make, simulate the on-premise element in there. So I have the virtual machine in there. And I have a SQL database in the cloud with the Northwind database. I think it's not showing here for some reason. Let me get this thing up in there. Let's see, should be here somewhere. SQL virtual machine, nope. I may have created somewhere else, some other resource group. In any case, I have a SQL database in there, and of course, I have Synapse going on over here. So here on Synapse workspace, when we go, again, we are doing this, right? We are doing the control flow in SSIS and all the conditions that goes in there. So the workflow, my package pretty much is the workspace, right? My whole workspace here is what would be my package, and I have only one package. I don't have multiple packages. So it's going to be an interesting scenario because we have cases in integration service where a package can call another package, right? So how does that go? How does that go? That goes like this. Everything here in integrate, when it comes into flow control, it will be into a pipeline. Is this working? No, it's not working. It will be here into a pipeline. And here in the pipeline, it's pretty much what would be your control flow level in a package on integration service. And you have the properties in there, like in integration service, you have the parameters, you have the variables, you can add those elements in here. The concepts are exactly the same. The way to work with these things, of course, is different, but the concept is exactly the same. You know what they are. And if I am to get things done in integration service, and let me see what would be the best way to do this. If I go back in here, so this is my virtual machine running integration service. In integration service, in my control flow level, I have what they call here the toolbox, right? And here in the toolbox, you have these elements. And the elements in here, to get a data flow task or execute a SQL task, and the common elements to get data from and to places in there, to control elements to the tasks. These ones here, they are translated into Synapse pipelines as activities. So all those activities you see at the control flow level, they don't exist all in here. They have different different names, and there are more. Some are here, some are not. But they are over here. So let's say if I want to do this particular activity, doesn't matter what the activity is. So I have an activity here, and I'm going to pop up another activity here. Let's get this other one in here. And I can get this other one. I already got this one. I got this one in here, popping up in here. And then I can do that control flow in a similar way that I would do with control flow level at integration service, right? If I click in here, and this little plus sign in here, I have the same elements, right? I have one other one here which is skipped that can be also defined for that one. But you will see the same elements in here. So this level, what is it here? This level here of the control flow in integration in Synapse pipelines, it's also called integration pipelines in the integration pipelines is the pipeline. Is the pipeline level. So you go ahead and create a new pipeline. Now, in integration service, we had the project or the package. I rather say we had the package, and we had the control flow, the elements inside the package. In Synapse, that was in SQL Server Integration Service. In the Synapse pipelines, and I'm trying to avoid the name integrate to avoid confusion, right? So we have SSIS and Synapse pipelines. So in the pipelines, what we have is just the pipeline itself, is that thing that controls flow. There is absolutely zero data transformation in here, as it was, or as it is for most of us, as it is in integration service. There is zero data transformation here. There's no transforming or changing of data. There is only the flow of data, getting data from place to place. So what if I want in SSIS, I had in my design, I have that thing of calling a package from within another package. You may recall to see something like this, right? You have those flows in between tasks on the same package, but you also have the ability to call packages, right, from a management or workflow management package. In Synapse, you would do the same thing by invoking other pipelines. So you see, you have an activity here that is executing pipelines. Let me collapse this here to get some more real estate. You have the execution pipelines, and in case I create here a second pipeline, where is it? Oh, sorry, I collapsed. Clicking here, let's get a second pipeline here. So this is my second pipeline, perfect. Let's go back to the first one. And here on my second pipeline, I can come here into settings on the execute pipeline tasks. I can come here into settings and say, I want you to execute the second pipeline. So after copying this data from someplace to someplace else, I want you to execute that second pipeline. So when I do this, I'm doing something like this, right? This particular task in here, right? This particular design in here. It's one pipeline calling another pipeline to whatever the other pipeline wants to do. So everything is always within one package. That's your workspace environment. And you can have these degrees of defining flow within tasks and defining flow in between packages when you just call another pipeline. So hope that is clear. And in your design patterns, they will apply in exactly the same way here. Now, the way to work with these things kind of different because we are dealing with other services different from the ones we have seen in SSIS, because we are dealing with the cloud. We have other stuff here for the cloud. One very interesting thing about this one here is everything I have created in here is just declarative. Exactly. See, it's very close to integration service, exactly like integration service. Everything here is declarative, but in integration service, you have an XML file with all the declarations. In here, we have a JSON document, right, with all those elements defined in there on my canvas so far for this particular pipeline. So I'm looking at pipeline one here. So yeah, because this is plain text like this can be stored in the code repository and it can be versioned, right? There are some limitations in particular for Azure pipelines at this moment, but it can be versioned. If you were working on a virtual on a computer, right, on your desktop, creating your packages like this, let me get rename this guy. On a package like this, you would be doing these things I was doing there and saving because we don't want to lose what we're doing, right? So when I'm doing this thinking here, where is this being saved? This is being saved nowhere. At this moment is in my browser. That browser session you see over there, it's in the browser. And if I close this browser, I close the whole thing. I mean, I lose the whole thing. You see over here, there is a little warning here from me saying, no, I need to publish this. Because if I don't publish this, it will lose, right? So I will lose my thing if I close the browser. So I can go ahead and click on publish. And it's going to tell me that there was a problem with the publish because I have a bunch of errors, misconfigured elements in my tasks, right? I'm just doing a quick demo here on building things from end to end. So there are a lot of missing settings in there. The bottom line in here is, as you do your thing and you finish setting up something, you don't have errors in your particular pipeline, don't forget to come here and publish. So when you publish this, where is it published to? By default, it's published to Synapse itself. Synapse has its own storage there on the lake, it creates for itself, and the storage account it creates for itself. But you can set up this guy here to connect to GitHub. And where is my thing? Here, down here, the last one. You can get this thing here connected to GitHub. And when you do this with GitHub, you still have one workspace with all the pipelines you come to create. But again, you can branch out. Multiple developers can work on the same would-be package in SSIS. And something you cannot do in SSIS, right? Everybody multiple people work in the same package, and then committing changes to the same package. So in here, you could do that. Either way, if you do Git integration or not, you must remember to keep publishing your work. If you don't publish your work, when you close the browser, it's gone. And a lot of people get mad at integration service because they're just a new environment. They're not familiar with this, and then the whole thing just stop working. All right, back to my slide deck here. So the control flow, the basic ideas of the control flow. Now let's get into the data, the other elements in control flow and the data flow. And here we see we have about 12 minutes to finish this. Let's see how much content I can cover from this. But there is one thing here I need you to keep in mind. And let me go back to this guy here. If I look into the data flows, of this sample package I got for the worldwide importers, is one of the sample databases for SQL Server. There are multiple extracts in here, and they're pretty much flat extracts, right? I browsed them all here. I couldn't find one that's really complex. But here's the thing that I have found that got me at first, and I see it happening to multiple people when they make the jump to Synapse pipelines. If I want to, in here, I can do like data conversion, and I can do some sort of union with other table and a bunch of other things in here. And I'm gonna break this thing up. I don't care. It's just to help you out, help you out to visualize this, help you guys out. So let's do this. It doesn't make any sense, but just for, let's get this guy here. The source, whatever. Union, let's get this union here. The union is missing the other portion of the union, but you got the idea. Here's a thing that a lot of people get confused when they get into Synapse Pipeline. In Azure in SQL Server Integration Service in SSIS, I have the data flow where I can do a straight copy, or I can get a complex data transformation until I hit the destination. And like I mentioned before, for on-premise scenarios, that was the thing, because it was always from a server to a server on the data center. When you get to the cloud, there are two steps to this. Usually you have a collecting of data from some source, Amazon AWS, local on-premise, Google Cloud, somebody else. You get the collection of data into your data lake, and then you start transforming data into the data lake. That's why we call it ELT instead of ETL. So to impress that and kind of force that into our design, when we go into Synapse pipelines, when you come here, you will find this activity here, copy data. And the idea of the copy data is to do that first step, to load data from whatever source it is into the lake, but to not transform the data. So in the Azure pipeline, there is no data transformation whatsoever. The data flow level you see in a package and integration service doesn't exist in the pipeline itself. This copy activity here, that a lot of people fight it. I have seen so many times. I'm sorry if it's your case, but sometimes I found it funny. People, they start looking into the settings in here. Sorry, here, copy data over here. They start looking here into the source and the sink, and they're like, what can I change in here? What is my mappings? I may have some elements here in the mappings where I get the column to another column. I can may be able to do some data transformation. Sometimes you're able to do some typecasting in here, which is usually not not recommended, right? You want to bring data raw as it is and avoiding any kind of a delay bringing the data into the lake with data transformation, the typecasting in this case. So this one here is just to get the data across. When you want to get data transformation, like in the integration service, you use a data flow. So here's the data flow. Here in the data flow is where you could come, and there is you see this little arrow over here on the top corner. It's where you get into the designer of the data flow, hopefully. Oh, here, I gotta do a new one here first. There we go. You get in the designer of the data flow, and here in the data flow is where you're gonna start working with the adding source data. Let's see here, I got a source, and then I have those options. There were kind of a showing there for me in integration service to do data transformation, right? So I got the union in there, I'm gonna pivot, I get all sorts of elements I could do integration service over here, right, on this guy here. And then it comes the big discussion of where should I change my data? Like if my source is SQL, should I do these things here in SQL? If my source is the data lake, and of course here I'm working with the data lake. I don't this data flow here will not go down to SQL to do things in SQL. The data is already in the data lake, hopefully. If it's not, it's going to be read from SQL and stored into the memory of the compute cluster in here, and all the processing will be done in the lake. So this one here is backed by a Spark engine under the hood. It's actually writing code. It's kind of a low code or no code data transformation when you just, like integration service is, when you just parameterize things and it generates code under the hood for you. So if you were there for Ginger's session earlier, a couple hours ago, and she was like, this kind of a complex for most companies, customers, they understand SQL. So if I do SQL, either Spark SQL or language like Python with SQL, that could be more manageable, palatable to the customers. I'm 100% with her, but again, if you are into integration service, if you have solutions in integration service, you are not unfamiliar with this, right? The interface is different. The way to work with these things is different. There is a learning curve, but the concepts, they translate pretty much one-to-one up to this point. There's a lot of things I'm not talking about here that doesn't exist, that they don't exist in integration service. But here is exactly what we have seen. We have the control flow over here. Oh, sorry, this one. You have the control flow over here, and you have the data flow, exactly the same name you have in integration service down here where you do your transformations. I'm sorry for the cross-reference right in between the other session, but I just love Ginger's section. She always does a great job. And there was a question in there about when you are here in the pipelines and you do a copy data, you cannot land to a Delta Lake. And she mentioned when you're in the data flow, you can land straight into the Delta Lake. So if you really want to save your data straight into that Delta Lake format in your data lake, data flow is the way to do. But again, usually you want to get the data as fast as possible from whatever sources, land it on a stage area, a temporary area, and from there you get the data into your bronze tier, and there you could have data lake, and there you could have the history of the data import, and then release whatever the data you have brought in as a raw format, right? Because I already have it in the Delta Lake. So this is how it works, right? It pretty much translates to the whole thing we have seen in there. So when you look into that in here, let's get my pointer in here again. You have here the sources, right? You have data sources and data destinations. So in the data flow, not in the pipeline, but in the data flow, you will have the same elements. You have data sources coming from here, and you have to set up the data sources, and you will have your data destinations. But guess what? They changed the name. For data sources, they kept it as source. For data destinations, because it's not handing or sending over to a particular database, but back to the data lake. So you're gonna sync. I like to joke about these things. It feels like we ran out of technical terms and start borrowing from other industries, right? Instead of save data, we are syncing data, like plumbing. And in between, like I did in integration service, I can do, other elements if I want to. And in this guy here, I would set up in here what would be my other source. So here's data source 2, and I can come in here, say I want to join data source 1 with data source 2, and what kind of join I want to do. Like I said, no code to low code, right? There are some places here where you can add some particular codes. Now, the other elements to this, we cannot cover in 45 minutes, right? I'm almost running out of time. So, there is a particular language, an expression language, and the languages are different when you do the pipeline, or the control flow, the pipeline, and when you do it at the data flow. They had distinct languages to do the expressions in there, and there is a learning curve to this. But as you could see, your knowledge, your skills from integration service can be translated into integration service, into Azure integration pipelines, pretty one-to-one for the most part, right? Some of the things I did not mention that you have in here is, this is all metadata. Where is this gonna run? Well, you gotta run on a server, and your server here is called your integration runtimes, IRs. Your integration runtime is your server. So when you run a pipeline, right, because you always start from the pipeline, when you run a pipeline, or would be your package, it will run based on the capacity of an integration runtime you link to your pipeline. So like you're gonna do one here to work on the cloud, no connection to on-premise. And here you can define the number of nodes. See, I cannot do that in integration service, right? How many servers in there? So as I get this thing bigger, pay more for the thing, of course. And what type of licensing I want for this guy? Which type of compute power for each node I come to deploy? And here, look at this one here. This is gonna cost me about $65 an hour. So it can get pretty expensive in a month. All right. With that in mind, I'm gonna wrap up here because we are out of time.